I'm going to try to record a funny intro now, but I can't pause my camera, so we're just going to have to leave it like that for now. I'm going to get out of frame real quick to do the intro, guys, so here we go. What you gonna do, brother, when these 14-inch homeless pythons come running after you, brother? Oh yeah, brother. Eat your milk and drink your money, brother. Anyways, sorry, I'm a little dry because it's roughly 714 degrees out here. We're going through the heat wave, El Diablo Wava, for my whatever language that is, speaking consumers, video watchers. Hey guys, how's it going? How you doing? Hi kids, do you like violence? It's another dynamic video from homeless failed artist out there. And today's topic, of course, as you recently heard, we lost truly not only an American treasure, but a treasure for the world. Hulk Hogan passed. There's that. Chuck Mangione passed. There's that as well. Ozzy Osbourne passed. There's that as well. And Theo passed. But we're not going to talk about those other guys today, brother. Today we're talking about the Hulkster, Hulkamania, Hulk Hogan, whatever his real name was. I didn't even bother to do proper notes for the video because I'm just going to wing it today. So, I'm not really tore up about Hulk Hogan passing. I'm not really tore up about him dying. I think it's appropriate to say that the men of the WWE and wrestlers' veteran status showed their pretty much their class by laying the man to rest, paying tribute. Of course, he did a lot for the business, but in all honesty, he basically completely ripped off his entire act and shtick and, you know, some would say look from a wrestler originally named Billy Graham. Now, Billy Graham in the 70s was doing some amazing numbers and doing some amazing things for the wrestling promotion. And essentially, when Billy Graham kind of fell off or they decided to throw him out like garbage, you know, they replaced him with Hulk Hogan, which was a protege or, you know, he knew Billy Graham from the way the story goes and stuff like that. And he basically took his whole shtick and made it into Hulkamania. So there you go. Sorry, it's very hot out here. This is the third day of a heat wave, and I am having some troubles right now being homeless in this heat wave. So forgive me if I'm not 100% quick today. But anyways, and I just walked down here, so. But yeah, basically Hulk Hogan, man. I mean, let me just start off by saying my family, my grandmother and stuff, and my grandpa Montgomery were the ones who originally, back in the early, late 80s, early 90s, got me into wrestling. Okay. My grandmother was a big wrestling fan. My grandfather was, back in the days of Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, stuff like that. My grandmother actually worked at a La Quinta Inn in Charlotte, where back in the day, the wrestlers would come through there and stay. And she got a bunch of pictures with the wrestlers. I had mentioned this in previous videos before. Never got a picture with the Hulkster, as it were, but she had a picture with Ric Flair, the Road Warriors, and it was awesome because she took these pictures when I was little, and here she was, my grandmother was maybe 5'1" top, standing amongst these giants, and her little, she wore glasses and she was a little short, stocky woman, and took these pictures among giants in her little La Quinta made housekeeping uniform. And she had these pictures, and it was like the Road Warriors were in their full gear, man. She got a picture with Arn Anderson as well, but the Road Warriors were in their full gear, and they took a picture with her, and it was pretty awesome. Here she was standing between the two of them, smiling, cheesing like a shit-eating dog, and they were in their full costume, and she was, standing between them. So, unfortunately, my family, those pictures are lost to time, or somebody in my family has those pictures. The Montgomery side of the family, there's only 2 people left. Everybody else is dead. But hopefully they saved those pictures, because those were an amazing moment in time. Anyways, so growing up during this era, I'm 42 years old, about to be 43 this September if I make it through this summer, if I'm still alive by the end of summer. But growing up in that day and age, man, you gotta really appreciate what Hulkamania was and what Hulk Hogan was. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not a video praising Hulk Hogan. This is exactly the opposite. But Hulk Hogan was beyond any kind of wrestling fame you can imagine up to that point. And I would dare say past that, because while you had things like The Rock and Stone Cold, who redefined wrestling during the Attitude Era and created a whole new genre, and you had other superstars, Triple H and stuff like that, they just never had the impact and the breadth and the reach that Hulk Hogan did. Now, bearing in mind that back then, there's several reasons for this. First of all, I believe Hulk and Austin and all the modern superstars never really went out of their way to sell something that they didn't fucking believe in. Okay. They never went out of their way to say, like, for the Rock, Stone Cold, for example, he never outright came out and said, "This is who I am." It was an exaggeration of who he was, but he was never like, "This is me completely." He never represented anything, and they never represented anything that was other than who they genuinely were, I feel. The Rock, as far as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, as far as I'm concerned, he is kind of what Hulk Hogan should have been in real life. Dwayne Johnson is, for all intents and purposes, every bit of philanthropic, kind, and just substantial as a Hulk Hogan persona. And he also has a great sense of humor as well. He just has so many gifts and so many talents. That was the closest that probably came to Hulkamania and the Hulk Hogan movement. But during the time back then, man, you got to understand that kayfabe was a huge thing. Kayfabe, of course, being the persona of the wrestler. For example, The Undertaker. The Undertaker did everything in his power to keep up the idea that this guy was some kind of undead necromancer kind of character, right? And Hulk Hogan was the same way, and all the wrestlers of that era were the same way, man. I mean, this is still an era when a lot of people believed this shit was real, and they put a lot of stock into it. And the discussion of it being fake was shot down, and sometimes with violence. If you look at some of the older interviews with wrestlers, old salty dog wrestlers during that time, the few reporters who did come along and say, "Oh, is this fake?" they got slapped in the face. They got physically attacked. So this was an era when, the kayfabe was very, very, very important. All right. Now, to understand also, not only did Hulkamania spread so wide across the country and so prevalent and so deep, I mean, if there was something you could imagine you could put Hulk Hogan in, it was there. From cereal to candy to every fucking thing you can imagine, man, had Hulk Hogan branding on it at some point in some way. He had dolls, he had this, he had everything. It was insane, the merchandising. Hulk Hogan probably made, God only knows how much money off of merchandising rights alone of his character. And I don't know exactly how much money the man had, but you would just, it would have to be ridiculous, ludicrous amounts of money. On top of that, he did movie after movie after movie after movie. I mean, it seemed for a while there that Hulk Hogan was just doing movies to do movies, man. And it was just insane. I mean, it literally was insane. And it is so hard for anybody who wasn't from that generation to really comprehend that. Like I said, The Rock and Stone Cold's era and aura and the Attitude Era and all that stuff doesn't even really come close to what Hulkamania was. And how much, respectfully so, how much business that drove to the WWE and stuff like that. So, of course, it took it to a whole new level, to be honest with you. The WrestleMania with Andre the Giant and Hulk basically put WrestleMania on the map, made it a household name, made it a huge event. I mean, he was there, fortunately, for so many milestones. And unlike with Rock and Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan was, for the most part, that he was just sold completely, whether through his doing or the business or whatever. He was sold completely to us as an American audience, and once again, or not once again, but basically, bearing in mind too, this was during an era when there was not, there was only, 8 TV stations. There was no internet. There was nothing outside of the TV and radio. These were the dark ages, okay? So when nothing really got around. Nothing really got around in the media and stuff like that. Nobody ever really talked about things for the longest time. That's why when the steroid scandal broke that involved Hogan and WWE and all that stuff, it was such a big thing for that business, because really that was just beyond the era of independent reporting and an internet, once again, where you could just find out anything instantly, or as soon as something happens, it's all over the place. Or there's cameras everywhere, whether through cell phones or police cams or security cams or something that catch everything on tape, right? So this was during an era of like complete regulated control of media. So if they didn't want something getting out, like Hulk Hogan being a dickhead or Hulk Hogan being an asshole to somebody, it was easy to suppress. But during that time, we were all sold on this Hulk Hogan mania. And as a child during that era, you got to understand how prevalent this programming and, dare I say, propaganda was, because it went beyond wrestling to the government was fostering Hulkamania and stuff like that. He was getting invited to the White House to take pictures with the presidents and governors and all this shit. I mean, it went so out of control, man. And this was during the era when celebrities were celebrities, okay? I mean, celebrities are still celebrities today, but back then, man, like, you reached a God tier kind of level. And the thing about it is that the mystique of these celebrities, for example, like Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee Herman during that time was rising up. These were one of the handful of many stars that we had that just transcended all forms of media. Pee Wee Herman was about the same as far as level of kind of crazy ass merchandising and stuff that this was just, I mean, between Pee Wee Herman and Hulk Hogan, I mean, those were two of the legitimate people who ran America for a while. Like, literally, I mean, I think if they could snap their fingers, they could get any fucking thing they wanted. But unlike Pee Wee Herman, Hulk Hogan did not have a fall until way, 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 way later. And unlike Pee Wee Herman was a comical character. Everything else in this list is basically like comical kind of, you can understand their character or a performance, but with Hulk Hogan, he was seen as genuinely the man, the myth, the thing he portrayed, right? So whenever he was like, follow Jesus, drink your milk, eat your cookies, drink your milk, say your prayers, read your books, and all this stuff. And you're going to be number one, brother. That was like legitimately what people thought he was. People thought he was a spick and span, all American, like perfect and flawless human being. That was the portrayal that was put out there. That this guy was basically infallible, and he had such a moral compass to where he could not be stopped, right? And in turn, off the back of that, he made God knows how much money. Now, it wasn't until way later that we found out the truth about Hulk Hogan. And I'm going to be fair in that respect. When you basically have a character or a mythos that is akin to literally a living Jesus, literally a living, embodiment of all that is good and virtuous, and you could do no wrong, any little thing you do is going to be, magnified 20 million times. But especially when it's something like the racist comments he made. Throwing his organization, the entire organization, under the bus when the steroid situation came out. There literally, if you start digging into Hulk Hogan, there isn't a new stone of just mistakes that he made come out. And me personally, the veil kind of dropped when I started watching Undertaker's podcast. And I got interested because I really liked The Undertaker as a character. And, he was just a guy who never spoke a lot. Did any interviews or talked a lot, but, he had this podcast where he was talking to people, and started listening to it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this guy's a human being, and he's a nice guy. He actually is a really genuinely, sincerely nice dude. And he, has a great podcast, 6 Feet Under. But he was talking about an incident with Hulk Hogan, where early in his career, he did a tombstone on Hogan, and Hogan, went backstage and was selling it like the man broke his neck. And Undertaker didn't. And at this point in time in Undertaker's career, he basically just came in as a young wrestler trying to come up in the ranks, and basically crippled the golden goose, crippled, the man who was bringing in millions of dollars, God knows how much money for the industry at that point, and basically was so marketable that they could put Hulk Hogan on anything and it would sell. And that was just one of many, 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 many stories that I started finding through wrestlers and associates and everything like that. And it was like not one single wrestler didn't have a story about how things went bad between them and Hulk Hogan. And, that's beyond what happened with, his racial comments, what happened with his religious beliefs and stuff like that. Like some things I didn't even know, and it seems like the more you dig, the more you find something that the guy did which was kind of screwed up, in one way or another. And I say all that to say is that I think Hulk Hogan, and the reason why I'm so, I don't know, kind of mean about kind of shitting on Hogan, is because Hulk Hogan was one of the most prevalent forms of propaganda in the United States that you could ever possibly have. I guess in a comparison would be for females, right? Probably Barbie. Barbie has been seen as, the old school Barbies had been seen as something that was a doll that promoted an unhealthy self-image in girls and stuff like that, and women. They saw that in G.I. Joe figures, and basically they seen that in wrestlers as well. But Hulk Hogan was one of the ones that really kind of promoted this whole body image thing and stuff like that. And it wasn't just, it was false. Obviously, he was taking steroids on top of, whatever else, performance enhancing drugs to become that big and muscular. But to us, he was telling us kids and telling people of that generation, my generation, who were younger fans, basically, drink your milk and take your vegetables, and you're going to be, huge like me, and you're going to have these big biceps and all this. And, ultimately the reason why I kind of shit on it so much is because that was just one big broken promise to my generation. You know, we were told by Hulk Hogan religiously that if we do this and we do that, and we're good people, that life is going to be great to us, and we're gonna grow big and strong and all this. And it was all a fucking lie. It was all a fucking lie. And not only that, the world got worse. And not many of us, even if we did work our ass off and bust our ass, found that kind of success and or prosperity and or whatever. Um, and really, that was like I said. You have to forgive me for being mean, but that's kind of how I see it as a fan. Not being a wrestling associate, not being in the business to owe him the tribute of putting the business on the map and getting us more success and blah 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 blah. But in the same turn, it's like as a fan, and I would like you to kind of measure these opinions as that of wrestling at that time, growing up. It just not only did it not work out for a lot of us that way, but he kept on keeping this image, and others fostered it. This image of a infallible Hulk, an infallible perfect man who, and it wasn't until way later when he turned heel, which is why that heel turn was so crushing. And like I said, if any kind of wrestlers or entertainment people run across this at some point, I don't know why, but if they ever did, as a fan, that you got to understand, that's exactly why that heel turn, if you don't really appreciate that as well, went so far with so many people, because a lot of people at that time were kind of that age and who were younger when growing up with Hulk Hogan during the Monday Night Wars, and when he turned heel and went NWO, they were getting older and they were finding out life was fucking shitty. But deep inside, I'm almost certain subconsciously they had this thing where it was like, Hogan was so programmed into him to where as long as Hogan, it was kind of one of those hero, complex sort of things, or hero worship kind of things. It's like, as long as we got Hogan and Hogan's still a good guy and Hogan's still true and virtuous, all can be right with the world, right? And then when he just did what he did, and I know that may seem a little over dramatic, but I mean, I feel like there was probably more than a handful of people who felt that way about Hogan. And even a younger generation up to that point started to get programmed on the Hogan Hulkamania before he did the heel turn. But I mean, it's just like, this is something that, as long as you have that, as long as that's still pure, as long as that person is still virtuous and strong and holds a moral character, then the bad guys of the world cannot truly win. And it goes beyond wrestling bad guys. It goes to government bad guys and all this and all that. It was like he was a legend, right? And up to that point, his reputation got a little bit screwed up, but it wasn't nowhere near as later on when the things would come out and the things would happen with questions of him touching his daughter and stuff like that when he was giving her that rub down, whatever, by the pool. And once again, this was just one of the most prevalent forms of American propaganda, that set a lot of people up for, just basically, the world doesn't work like this. The world isn't like that. The world, will fucking beat you down and shit you out, even if you are good, even if you do right, even if you do take care of people, even if you are strong and stuff like this. And I think that's why, for me at least, that's why I kind of have a damn, because if he lived by those values and he 100% backed those up in his personal life and everything he said, once again, this wasn't just somebody talking about, I'm this great yada yada yada. He was literally talking about core moral values and worked that into his shtick. So, as he took off, he had, and to his credit, there was at least more positive messages in that, or the attempt to do positive messages, I guess. And use it and utilize it for, substantial things. I think he did DARE campaigns and stuff like that. But just the man overall, hearing things from the business and all that and stuff like that, he was, greedy, short-sighted. There was just so many character flaws to it that go beyond just somebody who couldn't live up to an immaculate image. It was almost like everything that he put out there to the world was completely opposite of what he actually believed and felt. So, be that as it may. Go ahead and cut this video here because I'm feeling pretty crappy, but thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If there's anything you could do to help me out, my financial donation links are in the description. I'm currently homeless in Raleigh trying to piece my life back together or do launch my YouTube career in arts. I also do comic books and drawing and stuff like that. But anyways, that's pretty much it, guys. Love you. Thank you very much. And may the light bless you always. May the light guard and guide you. And thank you so much once again for watching. Check out my donation links down in the description. And please leave a comment about what Hulkamania and Hulkster, how you felt about it. That would help out a lot. Thank you so much.